There is something quietly remarkable about the idea of powerful people gathering in a single room to laugh together. In a city built on argument and ambition, on competing visions and carefully worded speeches, the very act of setting all of that aside for one evening carries a weight that is easy to underestimate. Washington, D.C. has always been a city of ceremonies, of rituals performed with great care, of traditions that stretch back through generations and carry within them the memory of everyone who came before. And among all of those rituals, there is one that stands apart from the rest, not because of its gravity, but precisely because of its lightness. The White House Correspondents' Dinner has been a fixture of Washington life for over a century. It began in 1921, a modest gathering of journalists who covered the president, a way for the press corps to come together, to mark the passage of another year, to honor their own work. It was never designed to be a grand spectacle. It was never meant to become the kind of event that fills celebrity gossip columns and generates television coverage for days before and after. It simply began as a tradition, as most meaningful. Things do, quietly and without fanfare. And yet, over the decades, it grew. It expanded in the way that traditions sometimes do when the world around them grows more complex, more mediated, more aware of itself. The small gathering of correspondents became a large banquet. The banquet grew to fill the Washington Hilton, a hotel so closely associated with the event that locals sometimes simply call it the Hinckley Hilton, a name that carries its own shadow of memory. Celebrities began to attend. Hollywood and politics found themselves seated at the same tables, smiling for the same cameras, laughing at the same jokes. And the president, whoever that happened to be at any given moment, would stand at the podium and attempt to show the room that they, too, could laugh, that they were capable of being human in public, of being something other than the weight of their office. It is a delicate performance, this annual dinner. The comedian hired to roast the room must somehow balance wit against offense, must read the temperature of 500 powerful people and decide how far to push before the laughter stops. The president must strike a tone that is self-deprecating, without being self-destructive, charming without being false. The whole evening is a kind of theater, and like all good theater, it depends entirely on the audience's willingness to suspend their everyday concerns and simply be present. For most of its history, the evening unfolded as planned. The food was served and cleared. The speeches were given. The awards were handed out. The laughter rose and fell. And then everyone returned to their lives, to their competing agendas and carefully guarded positions until the following year, when the whole ceremony would begin again. But there have been moments when the evening did not unfold as planned. Moments when the careful choreography of the event was interrupted by something that could not be scheduled or contained. And it is in those moments, those pauses in the performance, that history has a way of stepping into the room without an urn. Invitation. To understand what happens inside a room like the Washington Hilton, on an evening like the Correspondents' Dinner. It helps to understand something of the city that surrounds it. Washington, D.C. after dark is not quite like any other American city. There is a stillness that settles over certain neighborhoods in the evening, particularly around the monuments and the government buildings, that feels somehow intentional, as if the city itself is aware of the weight of what it contains. The National Mall empties slowly as the afternoon fades. The tourists who spent the day moving from one white stone building to another begin to drift toward their hotels and their restaurants. The guards remain at their posts. The lights come on in the office buildings that ring the capital, and somewhere in those illuminated windows, work continues at all hours. Because the business of governance does not keep ordinary hours. Pennsylvania Avenue stretches from the Capitol to the White House like a kind of spine running through the body of American political life. In the daylight, it is full of motion, of cars and motorcades and pedestrians hurrying between one important meeting and the next. At night, the street takes on a different quality. It becomes a stage without performers, a corridor of power that is briefly, quietly empty. The White House itself stands behind its iron fence, lit from below in a way that makes it appear almost luminous against the darkening sky. There are people inside at every hour, staffers who keep strange schedules, the Secret Service moving through corridors that most of the world will never see, the machinery of the executive branch continuing its endless operation. And somewhere within those walls, on any given evening, the president is present, carrying the particular kind of solitude that comes with that office. Even when surrounded by dozens of people, Washington is a city that understands ceremony. It was designed from the beginning to be a place where ceremony could unfold at scale, where the rituals of democratic governance could be performed with sufficient grandeur to communicate their importance to the world. The architects and planners who laid out its broad avenues and its formal gardens were thinking about exactly this, about how a city could make visible the invisible authority of a nation. And so when a large group of people gathers in this city, for any formal occasion, they are participating, whether they know it or not, in something that extends well beyond the walls of whatever room they happen to be in. They are part of a long procession of gatherings and ceremonies that stretches back to the beginning of the Republic, each one adding its small thread to the larger fabric of national life. The Correspondents' Dinner belongs to this tradition. Even if its tone is often lighter than most, it is still, at its heart, a gathering of people who have been granted unusual proximity to power, who spend their working lives in the particular atmosphere of Washington, who understand the city in ways that most outsiders do not. And when they come together each spring in that hotel ballroom, they bring all of that understanding with them, along with their formal clothes and their small plates of food, and their readiness to laugh. What they cannot always bring with them is certainty about what the evening will hold. That is something the night itself decides, and the night, as history has occasionally demonstrated, does not always cooperate. There is a kind of architecture to any formal event, an invisible structure that holds everything in place and gives participants their cues, their sense of timing, their understanding of what comes next. A state dinner, a diplomatic reception, a gathering of the press corps in the presence of the president. All of these events have their own internal grammar, their own sequence of moments that move from arrival to conclusion along a path that has been carefully mapped in advance. The planning for an evening like the White House Correspondents' Dinner begins months before the event itself. There are tables to assign and sponsors to confirm, a comedian to select and brief, a menu to design, security protocols to review and update. The White House Correspondents Association, which organizes the dinner, has been doing this for generations, and they have accumulated the kind of institutional knowledge that only comes from doing something over and over again, from learning what works and what does not, from watching the evening succeed and occasionally stumble and finding a way to continue. Regardless, Security at an event that includes the President of the United States is, naturally, a matter of great complexity. The Secret Service begins its preparations long before the guests arrive. The hotel is swept and secured. Every person who will be present undergoes background checks. The routes that the presidential motorcade will take are mapped and communicated. The agents who will stand in the room itself, scanning the crowd with a particular kind of attention that is their professional gift, are briefed and positioned. And yet, for all of this preparation, the evening retains a quality of openness that is, in its own way, remarkable. This is not a closed ceremony. It is attended by hundreds of people, by journalists and politicians and celebrities and their various guests. The tables are arranged in the democratic fashion of a large banquet hall, and the president, despite all of the protection that surrounds them, sits in a room full of strangers who are eating and drinking and talking and laughing, who are, in short, behaving as people behave when they have gathered for a celebration. This is, of course, intentional. The symbolism of the president attending such an event, of being present in a room of journalists in a spirit of openness and good humor, carries a message that is important to the relationship between the executive branch and the free press. The dinner is, in part, a public performance of that relationship, a demonstration that even amid the inevitable tensions between government and the journalists who cover it, there is still room for a shared laugh, a mutual acknowledgement of humanity. The comedian who performs at the dinner occupies a uniquely complicated position. They are there to entertain, certainly, but they are also there to hold a mirror up to power, to speak truths that are difficult to speak in other contexts, to use the license of humor to say things that the formal atmosphere of official Washington does not typically permit. Some performers have used this license gently, with warmth and affection. Others have used it more sharply, pushing against the boundaries of what the room will accept, watching faces for signs of discomfort, measuring the silence that follows a particularly pointed observation. The president's remarks, which traditionally come before the comedian's set, follow a different kind of script. They are carefully crafted by speechwriters who understand both the president's voice and the particular requirements of the occasion. They are meant to be funny, yes, but they are also meant to be presidential, to demonstrate that the person holding the highest office in the land is capable of laughing at themselves, of acknowledging the absurdities that attend life in the public eye. It is in the end a very specific kind of performance. And like all performances, it depends on the assumption that nothing will interrupt it, that the invisible architecture of the evening will hold, that the night will proceed from beginning to end along the path that has been laid out for it. History, of course, has other ideas. The year was 1981, and the Washington Hilton was hosting the White House correspondents' dinner as it had done 4 years before and would do 4 years after. The evening had proceeded in its customary fashion, with the gathering of guests and the serving of food and the gentle anticipation of the speeches to come. Ronald Reagan, who had been in office for only a few months, was scheduled to attend, which added an additional layer of security to the already careful preparations. But Reagan did not attend the dinner that evening. Or rather, he attended only in voice, via a telephone call from his hospital room at George Washington University Hospital, where he was recovering from a wound that had come close to ending his life. On the afternoon before the dinner, March 30th, 1981, Reagan had been leaving the Washington Hilton Hotel after speaking to a group of union members. The very same hotel where the dinner would be held that evening. As he walked toward his limousine, a young man named John Hinckley Jr. fired a revolver from the crowd of onlookers and journalists gathered near the exit. One of the bullets ricocheted off the presidential limousine and struck Reagan in the left side, lodging itself just an inch from his heart. In the chaos that followed, Reagan's Secret Service detail pushed him into the limousine and rushed toward the White House before changing course to George Washington University Hospital when it became clear the president was seriously injured. Press Secretary James Brady was shot in the head. A police officer and a Secret Service agent were also wounded. The scene outside the hotel, which had been an ordinary afternoon in Washington, was suddenly transformed into something that the people present would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Reagan survived, and his survival was attributed to both the speed of the medical response and the president's own physical constitution. He was 69 years old, the oldest man to have held the office at that point, and yet he recovered with a resilience that surprised even his physicians. Within weeks he was back at work, and he would go on to serve nearly 2 full terms in office. The dinner that evening went forward, as such events often do in the aftermath of crisis, because the alternative, the cancellation of the ceremony, would have carried its own kind of signal, its own acknowledgement that normal life had been disrupted in a way that could not be managed. Reagan called in by telephone, his voice carried into the room through a speaker, and the crowd that heard it understood that they were witnessing something that the careful choreography of the evening had never anticipated. A president addressing the gathering from a hospital bed, the formal event continuing its rhythm even as the world outside had been briefly, violently interrupted. It is in moments like these that tradition reveals something of its deeper purpose. A ceremony is not merely a performance. It is also a container, a way of holding experience steady while the ground beneath it shifts. The dinner continued, and in continuing, it served notice that the life of institutions endures beyond the shocks that interrupt it, that the architecture of formal occasions can absorb disturbance and still stand. There is a language that surrounds high-security events that most people never fully learn. A vocabulary of protocols and procedures and contingency, plans that exists just beyond the edge of what is visible to the ordinary guest. This language is spoken by the Secret Service agents, who move through a room like the correspondence dinner ballroom with a particular kind of presence. By the advanced teams who have already mapped every exit and identified every potential concern before the first guest arrives. The Secret Service was established in 1865, originally not to protect the president but to combat the widespread counterfeiting of currency that was undermining the post-Civil War economy. Its mandate expanded over the decades as the threats to presidents became more apparent. Most notably after the assassination of President James Garfield in 1881 and then of William McKinley in 1901. McKinley's death, which came just 6 months into his second term, prompted a formal assignment of Secret Service agents to the Presidential Protection Detail, a practice that has continued and expanded ever since. The methods of protection have changed enormously over the decades, moving from a small group of agents walking alongside the president to a vast and layered security apparatus that includes counter-sniper teams, electronic countermeasures, armored vehicles, and detailed intelligence gathering that begins long before any public appearance. The motorcade that carries a modern American president is itself a kind of fortress in motion, surrounded by follow-up cars and sweeper vehicles and police escorts. a bubble of protection moving through the ordinary world. And yet protection is never absolute. This is the fundamental tension at the heart of all presidential security, and it is a tension that the people responsible for that security carry with them always. A democracy requires its leaders to be visible, to appear among the people they serve, to attend events and shake hands and be photographed in public places. The president cannot govern from behind perfect walls. The nature of the office demands presence, demands accessibility, demands the kind of visible participation in public life that is, by definition, impossible to fully secure. This tension has shaped the design of presidential public appearances in subtle ways that most people never notice. The routes of motorcades change without announcement. The schedule of events is never fully published in advance. The precise location where the president will stand, the exact timing of arrivals and departures, these details are managed with great care, revealed only to those who need to know, and only as close to the moment of the event as possible. The Correspondence Dinner presents particular challenges from a security perspective precisely because of its nature as a large, semi-public gathering. It is not a state dinner with a small, known guest list. It is a banquet attended by hundreds of people, some of them well known to the Secret Service and some of them new faces. Guests of guests, plus ones whose backgrounds have been checked, but whose presence adds a layer of complexity to the evening's security calculus. In the years since 1981, the security around the event has intensified considerably. Metal detectors and bag checks that were once cursory became thorough. Credentialing requirements became more stringent. The area around the hotel in the hours before and after the dinner is carefully managed, with police presence visible on surrounding streets and less visible presences stationed in less obvious locations. And still the evening happens. Still the evening happens. Still the eve, the imagination, the world seems to pause. The world seems to pause, with police presence visible on surrounding streets and less visible on surrounding streets and less visible presences, stationed in less obvious locations, and still the evening happens. Still the evening happens. Still the evening happens. Still the even. Guests arrive in their formal clothes and surrender their phones at certain checkpoints and take their seats at their assigned tables and laugh at the comedian's jokes and applaud the president's remarks. The security does its work in the spaces between the visible moments, in the margins of the event, so that the thing itself can proceed with the lightness it is meant to have. The interrupted evening at the Washington Hilton in 1981 was not, of course, the first time in American history that a presidential public appearance had been struck by sudden violence. The record of American history includes a painful number of such moments, and each of them has left its mark not only on the specific events that followed, but on the larger culture of presidential security and presidential ceremony. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in a theater. He was attending a performance at Ford's Theater in Washington on the evening of April 14, 1865. Just 5 days after the Confederate surrender that effectively ended the Civil War. The theater was full. The audience was enjoying the play. And Lincoln was present in his box above the stage, his profile visible to the crowd below in a way that, in retrospect, seems almost unbearably open, almost naive in its exposure. John Wilkes Booth entered the theater and made his way to the presidential box and fired a single shot. And the celebration of Union victory that had filled the streets of Washington all week was overtaken by a grief. that would settle over the war. City and the nation for months afterward. James Garfield was shot at a Washington train station in 1881. Just 4 months into his presidency, he lingered for more than 2 months before dying of his wounds, a prolonged ordeal that consumed the attention of the country and left the government effectively leaderless for the duration. Garfield's assassination occurred in the kind of public space that was then entirely normal for a president to navigate without heavy protection. And the shock of it came partly from the ordinariness of the setting, a busy railway terminal, a crowd of travelers. An ordinary morning transformed into something historical. William McKinley was shot at a public reception in Buffalo, New York, in 1901. He had been shaking hands with a long line of well-wishers when Leon Czolgosz approached, with a pistol concealed beneath a bandage on his right hand. McKinley died 8 days later, and the Vice President, Theodore Roosevelt, was sworn in as his successor, becoming at 42 the youngest president in American history. John F. Kennedy was killed in Dallas in 1963, riding in an open-top motorcade. Through Delhi Plaza, and the shock of that moment, which was witnessed live by onlookers on the street and then replayed on television screens across the country in the hours and days that followed, entered the American imagination in a way that no previous presidential assassination had quite managed to do. The Zapruder film, the amateur footage shot by a Dow's businessman, captured the moment in a way that was both terrible and impossible to look away from, and its existence ensured that the event would be revisited, analyzed, debated, and mourned. Across generations, Robert F. Kennedy was shot in a hotel kitchen in Los Angeles in 1968, just after winning the California Democratic primary, at a moment when his path to the presidency seemed not merely possible, but probable. Martin Luther King Jr. had been killed 2 months earlier, and the country was already raw with grief and tension. And the death of Kennedy in that hotel kitchen seemed to many people to signal something about the fragility of public life, about the costs of visibility, about the dangers that attend those who choose to be present in the world in a certain way. What all of these moments share, beyond the obvious fact of violence, is the quality of interruption. They broke into the ordinary flow of events, into the carefully managed schedules and the formal arrangements and the public ceremonies, and replaced them, at least temporarily, with something entirely beyond the control of the planners and the security personnel and the institutional machinery that normally governs such occasions. And what follows each interruption is, eventually, a return. Not to the exact moment before the violence, because that moment is irretrievable, but to the continuation of public life, to the resumption of ceremonies and gatherings and the ordinary rituals that give a society its shape. This is not denial. It is something else, something closer to insistence, to the determination to continue the life of the community even in the shadow of its losses. There is something that happens to a person when they enter a room full of other people for a formal occasion, something that is difficult to name but easy to recognize. A kind of collective attunement, a subtle adjusting of individual selves to the shared atmosphere of the event. The clothes help, because formal dress removes a layer of ordinary individuality and replaces it with something more ceremonial. The architecture helps, because a well-designed formal room communicates its own expectations, its own sense of what kind of behavior is appropriate within its walls. But it is the shared intention that matters most. The fact that everyone in the room has come for the same reason, has agreed, at least implicitly, to participate in the same event, to observe its rhythms and respond to its cues and carry its meaning with them when they leave. This shared intention creates a social bond that is temporary but real, a community that exists for the duration of the event and then disperses back into the ordinary plurality of individual lives. This is why disruption at a formal gathering carries such a particular weight. It does not merely interrupt the schedule. It breaks the collective attunement, shatters the shared intention, forces everyone in the room to relocate themselves within a new and unexpected reality. The psychological impact of a sudden disturbance in a formal setting is partly about fear and partly about disorientation, about the experience of having the floor of shared reality abruptly shift. People who have been present at events disrupted by sudden violence or unexpected crises often describe a particular quality to the moment of disruption itself, a kind of temporal distortion in which the event seems to slow, to become hyper-clear before the ordinary flow of time resumes. This is the response of a nervous system encountering something that it cannot immediately categorize, that falls outside the expected patterns of the evening. The brain, accustomed to the predictable choreography of a formal event, suddenly finds itself processing information for which it has no ready template. What follows? In the immediate aftermath of disruption, tends to be a kind of collective negotiation. People look to each other for cues about how to respond, for signals about the severity of what has occurred, for guidance about what the appropriate emotional register of the moment should be. Professionals, trained for exactly these situations, move through the room with a calm that is itself a message, a communication to the crowd that the situation is being managed, that there are people whose job it is to handle what has just happened. The training that security personnel receive for moments of disruption is, in part, psychological as well as physical. They are trained to project calm because they understand that their demeanor will influence the behavior of the people around them. A crowd that sees its protectors move with confidence and purpose is more likely to remain orderly than a crowd that sees confusion and panic in the faces of those responsible for its safety. This is a form of communication, a kind of performance, in its own right, performed under conditions of genuine stress. For the guests at an event like the correspondence dinner, the experience of disruption is filtered through the particular sensibilities of Washington. These are people who understand, at least intellectually, that they exist in proximity to the most powerful office in the world, and that this proximity carries certain risks. They have been briefed on emergency procedures, at least in passing. They work in an environment where security is a constant ambient presence. And yet, for all of this understanding, the actual experience of disruption still arrives as a shock, still breaks through the layers of familiarity and professional cool to touch something more fundamental, something that belongs not to the world of politics and journalism, but to the older, simpler world of human vulnerability. The dinner continues, and the people in the room continue with it. And when they go home that night, they carry two things with them: the memory of the ceremony, of the food and the speeches and the laughter, and the memory of the moment when the ceremony was interrupted, when the invisible architecture of the evening revealed its limits. There is a fundamental paradox at the heart of democratic governance, and it is a paradox that becomes most visible at events like the correspondence dinner. The paradox is this: the most powerful person in the country must also be the most visible, must submit to a degree of public exposure that would be entirely unnecessary, and in many ways undesirable, from a purely security-focused perspective. A dictator can govern from behind walls. An authoritarian system has no particular need for its leader to mingle with crowds, to attend public gatherings, to sit in a hotel ballroom surrounded by journalists and their guests. The protection of such a leader is, in theory at least, simpler, because the leader's exposure to the public can be carefully controlled and minimized. A democratic president operates under entirely different conditions. The office demands visibility. It demands the performance of accessibility, the demonstration that the person who holds the most powerful position in the country is still, in some meaningful sense, a person among other persons, subject to the same exposure and the same risks that attend any public appearance. The president must attend events, must appear in public, must be seen to be living in the same world as the people who elected them. This is not merely ceremonial. It is constitutional in the deepest sense of that word. The legitimacy of democratic governance rests on the consent of the governed, and that consent is maintained partly through the ongoing visibility of the government to the people it serves. A president who never appeared in public, who communicated only through intermediaries, who was never accessible in the way that public figures in a democracy are expected to be, would begin to lose the quality of democratic legitimacy, would seem to be retreating behind walls that democracies are not supposed to have. The correspondence dinner is, in this context, a kind of ritual enactment of democratic accessibility. The president appears before the press, the formal representatives of the public's right to know, and sits with them and laughs with them and allows themselves to be gently mocked. It is a performance of accountability, a demonstration that even the most powerful person in the country must submit, at least once a year, to the discomfort of public scrutiny expressed through humor. When the evening is disrupted, this ritual of accountability is briefly suspended. The president is no longer the subject of gentle mockery, but the focus of urgent concern. The journalists who were just laughing at the president's self-deprecating jokes are now trying to report on an attempt on the president's life, or on whatever disturbance has shattered the evening's careful choreography. The relationship between power and press, which the dinner exists partly to manage and partly to celebrate, is reconfigured by the disruption, at least temporarily, into something more serious and more fraught. And yet the relationship continues, because it must. Because the alternative, a world in which the disruption is allowed to permanently alter the terms of the relationship between the presidency and the press, would be a world in which the disruption had won, in which fear had reshaped the structure of democratic life in some fundamental way. The dinner happens again the following year, and the year after that. The president appears, and the journalists gather, and the comedian takes the stage, and the evening proceeds along its familiar path. This is, in its quiet way, a form of courage. Not the dramatic, visible courage of the person who acts in a moment of immediate danger, but the slower, less celebrated courage of continuing, of insisting that ordinary life be allowed to go on. History, when it remembers moments of sudden disruption, tends to focus on the drama of the disruption itself, on the violence or the shock or the immediate consequences. This is understandable. The dramatic moments are the ones that photographs can capture and newspapers can headline and documentaries can reconstruct. They are the moments that enter the collective memory most vividly. that become the reference points around which subsequent events are organized. But there is another dimension to these moments that history records more quietly, and that is the aftermath. The return to routine, the resumption of ceremony, the gradual process by which a community absorbs a shock and finds its way back to something that, while not identical to what existed before, is recognizable as ordinary life. After the shooting at the Washington Hilton in 1981, the hotel did not close its doors. The Correspondents' Dinner continued to be held there in subsequent years. Reagan returned to public life and to political ceremony with a speed that was, in retrospect, remarkable, and his survival of the assassination attempt became part of the mythology of his presidency, contributing to his reputation for resilience and good humor. He reportedly joked with the surgeons who operated on him, asking if they were Republicans, a line that was repeated so many times in the days and weeks that followed that it became part of the national narrative of the event, a way of managing the terror of it by wrapping it in a story about the president's composure, the capacity to joke in the face of mortal threat is not unique to Reagan. It is a human response to the unbearable quality of genuine danger, a way of asserting some form of control over an experience that has stripped away all ordinary forms of control. The joke says, "I am still here. I am still myself. What happened to me has not taken away my ability to respond with wit." This is a form of survival that goes beyond the merely physical in the longer memory of the Republic. The events of March 30th, 1981 sit alongside all of the other moments when the ordinary life of the American presidency was interrupted by something that could not be scheduled. They are part of a pattern that has no single meaning, that does not yield to simple interpretation, that simply is what it is. A record of the vulnerability that attends public life, and of the persistence with which public life continues despite that vulnerability. The Washington Hilton still stands on Connecticut Avenue, the same building where Reagan walked out to his car that afternoon and where the annual dinner continues to be held each spring. People who attend the dinner today are aware, on some level, of what happened there in 1981. The knowledge is part of the atmosphere of the place, part of its history. And yet the evening proceeds. The tables are set, and the guests arrive, and the comedian tells their jokes, and the president makes their remarks. Memory coexists with ceremony. The shadow of what happened is present, but it is not the only thing that is present. The room also holds the light of all the evenings that passed without incident, all the years in which the tradition was kept, and the laughter was genuine, and the evening ended in the ordinary way. There is something important in this coexistence, something that speaks to the way communities manage the weight of their own histories. To remember is not to be paralyzed by memory. To acknowledge that something terrible once happened in a place is not to be prevented from gathering there again. The choice to continue is not a choice to forget. It is something more complex, a decision to carry the memory forward while refusing to let it be the only thing that defines the place and the tradition. Long after the evening ends, long after the cars have pulled away from the hotel and the last staff member has switched off the lights in the ballroom and the city has settled into its late-night quiet, something of the gathering lingers. Not in any mystical sense, but in the practical sense that all events leave traces in the memories of the people who are present, in the photographs that will be published, and the articles that will be written, and the stories that will be told. Over the following days and weeks, these traces accumulate over time. Each year adds its layer to the archive of the event, its stack of photographs and programs and guest lists and reviews. Decades of such accumulation create something that is more than the sum of its parts. A record not just of individual evenings, but of the changing relationship between the presidency and the press, between power and the people who hold it accountable, between the formal ceremonies of public life and the human beings who participate in them. The Correspondents' Dinner has changed significantly over the course of its century-long history. The room has expanded and the celebrity presence has grown, and the media coverage has intensified, and the comedian's role has become more prominent and more politically charged. There have been years when the event generated more controversy than laughter, when a performer's remarks cut too deep and the room fell into an uncomfortable silence that was itself a kind of statement. There have been years when the president's remarks were unexpectedly sharp, when the humor had an edge that surprised even the most experienced Washington observers. And there have been years, like 1981, when the evening was overshadowed not by anything that happened in the ballroom, but by events on the street outside the hotel, events that reached into the room via telephone and transformed the carefully planned ceremony into something improvised. Something that no one in the planning meetings had anticipated or prepared for. What endears from all of these evenings is something that is difficult to define precisely, but easy to recognize when you encounter it. It is the sense of a community that has gathered and dispersed and gathered again, that has been tested and has persisted, that has absorbed the worst that history could throw at it and has continued to set the tables and send the invitations, and arrange for someone funny to stand at a microphone and make powerful people uncomfortable in ways that somehow everyone agrees are necessary. This is not a small thing. In a city and a culture that are too often characterized by their divisions, by the sharpness of their disagreements and the bitterness of their conflicts, the Correspondents' Dinner represents something genuinely rare. An annual agreement to be in the same room, to laugh at the same jokes, to share, however briefly, a common recognition of the absurdity of public life. It does not resolve the disagreements. It does not heal the divisions. It does not pretend that the relationship between the press and the president is always comfortable, or that the work of accountability is always welcome. What it does is something more modest and, in its modesty, more profound. It insists that the relationship exists, that it continues, that it is worth maintaining even through all the friction and all the conflict, and all the moments when maintaining it requires more effort than either side would like. It insists, year after year, that the gathering itself is important, that the ceremony matters, that the tradition carries something of value that transcends the political weather of any particular moment. And so the invitations go out each spring, and the tables are set, and the lights come up in the ballroom of the Washington Hilton, and the guests arrive in their formal clothes, and the evening begins again. The room fills with the sound of conversation and the clink of glasses, with the gathering energy of a crowd that has come together for a shared purpose. Outside, the city moves through its night. The monuments stand in their familiar pools of light. Pennsylvania Avenue stretches between the Capitol and the White House. That long corridor of American political life, quiet now in the late hour. The flags move slightly in whatever wind is moving through Washington at that moment, carrying the memory of all the evenings that have come before. And inside the ballroom, the comedian steps up to the microphone, and the president sits at their table with an expression that is carefully neutral, prepared to absorb what is coming, prepared to laugh if it is funny enough, prepared to perform for one more evening. the ritual of democratic accountability that this gathering has always been. The room holds its breath for just a moment. That shared pause before a performance begins, that collective suspension of ordinary time that marks the threshold between the everyday and the ceremonial, and then the evening unfolds, as it has always unfolded, in its own particular way, shaped by everything that has come before it and carrying, within its hours, the weight of a tradition that has survived whatever history has placed in its path. The laughter rises, and somewhere in it, if you listen carefully enough, you can hear the echo of all the evenings that preceded this one. All the rooms that held this gathering before this room, all the presidents and journalists and comedians, and guests who sat where these people are sitting now and shared, for one evening, the strange and improbable gift of being present together in the same place at the same time, laughing at the same things, citizens of the same complicated, enduring, continuing story. And as that laughter fades at the evening's end, as the last guests step out into the night and the city reclaims its quiet, the tradition simply waits, patient and unhurried, for the same gathering to begin again. Some things endure, not because they are perfect, or because they are easy, or because history has been kind to them. They endure because the people who participate in them keep choosing to return, keep deciding that the ceremony is worth preserving, keep showing up year after year to set the tables and take their seats and let the evening begin. That is, in the end, what a tradition is. Not a monument to the past, but a commitment to the future. A quiet insistence that what has been worth doing is worth doing again. That the room can be set, and the guests can gather, and the lights can come up, and the evening can begin. No matter what the record of the past contains, the interrupted evenings are part of the record. So are all the evenings that were not interrupted, that unfolded in the ordinary way, that were forgotten almost immediately because they did not contain anything dramatic enough to lodge in memory. And so are all the evenings that are still to come, the tables not yet set, the guests not yet invited, the comedian not yet chosen, the words not yet written that will bring the room to laughter in some future spring. History does not end. It continues, gathering its material, adding its layers, moving forward through time with the patient accumulation of one moment after another. Each one ordinary until it is not, each evening a rehearsal for the unexpected, each gathering a small act of faith in the possibility of continuing. And so the city settles into its night, and the tradition waits in the quiet of its archive, and somewhere in the plans being made for next year's dinner, in the early conversations and the preliminary arrangements and the first tentative entries on the calendar, the story is already beginning again.